Charles Delaney was a popular silent leading man of the 1920s and made a successful transition of starring in the Talkies in 1929. But by the mid-30s, he had moved to character acting. Why? Join me as I investigate. Charles Delaney was born in New York City in 1892. There is very little information out there about his early life or his family. We do know that he worked as an auto mechanic before enlisting to fight in World War I, where he became a pilot. Upon returning from war, Charles began acting in vaudeville and had a popular aerial act in which he performed flying stunts on the stage. This experience led him to motion pictures, where he made his film debut in 1922 in the drama Solomon in Society, in a major supporting role which got him noticed by Variety. After being featured in 2 films in 1923, he had another major role in 1924's Those Who Dance, which starred Bessie Love and Blanche Sweet. In 1925, Charles began starring in comedy shorts at various smaller studios, including a few films with Samuel Bishop Productions as McTeague, an unsuccessful boxer that yearns for an education, much to the chagrin of his manager, who was played by Eddie Phillips. He also made a few shorts opposite Dorothy Drew for LB Pictures. However, his big break did not come until 1926, when he starred with Marceline Day in College Days at Tiffany as football star Jim Gordon. The film appears to have been a big hit and moved Charles into juvenile leading man territory. Interestingly enough, he was 35 years old upon the release of this film, but looked over a decade younger. In early 1927, Charles starred in Husband Hunters with Mae Bush as an honest working man that captures the heart of young Jean Arthur. The film also appears to have been a big hit and got good reviews in Photoplay and Variety. Charles played several similar good guy roles later that same year. Highlights included The Silent Adventure, The Adventurer, and The Surviving the 13th Hour, in which he played Detective Matt Gray, who was out to rescue Jacqueline Gadsden from the villainous Lionel Barrymore. The film got him a good notice in Variety and much press in other film magazines, including Photoplay. Charles finished out 1927 strong, being cast by Cecil B. DeMille in his film The Main Event, in which he starred as boxer Johnny Regan. This film was also a hit and got Charles a great review in Variety, and the film was remade in 1979 with Ryan O'Neal taking over the role and starring with Barbra Streisand. Charles entered 1928 still a popular leading man. He starred with Sue Carroll in The Coens and Kellys in Paris, with Helene Chadwick in Women Who Dare, and with Priscilla Bonner in Outcast Souls. He also starred with Alice White in the huge smash hit Showgirl at First National, playing reporter Jimmy Doyle. Variety praised his performance again as the tabloid reporter, a niche he would fill in several subsequent films over the next several years. Later in 1928, Charles made his talkie debut in The Air Circus at Fox, which starred Arthur Lake and Sue Carroll. In 1929, he was reunited with Alice White in the talkie musical Broadway Babies, in which he played a stage manager this time, and then again with her in The Girl from Woolworths as a subway guard that falls in love with Alice as the title character. Variety praised his comedic abilities, particularly in this film. Charles entered the 1930s as quite the popular young leading man in the talkies. He starred as Irish Terry, a hard-working plumber in love with Sally O'Neill and Kathleen Mavourneen. While the character sang several songs, Delaney was dubbed by Donald Novis. Despite Charles having quite the successful entry starring in the talkies in films First National and Tiffany and getting raves for his work, he gradually began to shift to character work in B-movies at Poverty Row Studios. Initially, he starred in these movies such as 1930s Western The Lonesome Trail. He also had an occasional featured part in a major studio film here and there, including his excellent work in Millie at RKO as a good-hearted chauffeur that tries to protect the title character, played by Helen Twelvetrees, and her daughter, played by Anita Louise. However, no matter the size of the role or where he was playing it, Charles threw himself 100% into character in each and every part that he played, becoming one of the truly great and busiest character actors working in Hollywood over the next several years. Some of his starring role highlights of the 1930s include Honest Cop Tom Varney in Hearts of Humanity, and Injured State Trooper in Officer 13, both from 1932. as boozy reporter Charlie Jasper in Corruption in 1933, and as wisecracking funny reporter Breezy Benson that tries to get the scoop on rich Betty Compson in The Millionaire Kid in 1936. Supporting highlights of the 30s included the constable sidekick of Kermit Maynard in The Fighting Trooper in 1934, and Dan, the detective who attempts to help troubled youth from the dangers of drugs and alcohol in The Pace That Kills in 1935. Charles worked in several more films throughout the 30s, but slowed down a bit as he entered the 1940s. He had a brief but memorable turn as another reporter fired by Chester Morris in Double Exposure in 1944. Charles worked more often in the 1950s, exclusively as a character actor both in movies and on television, with his TV work being more substantial. He guest starred in supporting character roles on several series such as Mr. and Mrs. North, The Abbott and Costello Show, Adventures of the Falcon, Medic, and Crossroads. He continued making appearances in motion pictures until 1958, having a memorable supporting role in the cult classic The Beatniks, which was not released until 1960 and sadly proved to be his final film. Charles had kept working right up until the end of his life, passing away from natural causes at the age of 67 in 1959 shortly after finishing the film. He was survived by his wife of several years, Mary Meek. So we are left with the question, why did Charles Delaney's talkie career lose its momentum after such an impressive start? I think the best answer is that there were just so many juvenile leading men in the talkies at the dawn of the 30s, and there were even more coming in from the stage that it was hard for Charles to keep up his work in that niche. So he moved into character work and had a very successful second act of his career as one of the hardest working and busiest character actors in Hollywood. Like I say about so many stars that moved into character work at Poverty Row Studios, Charles truly did some of his best work once he moved into that territory. He showed a real flair for both comedy and drama and gave some of his best performances as wisecracking, fast-talking reporters. When the medium of television began to grow in popularity in the 1950s, Charles easily transitioned to character work there too, guest starring on several popular series as various older man-type roles. He even was hip enough to appear in an exploitation cult classic shortly before his death. What a legend. Charles Delaney was a truly great actor, and I heartily encourage you to check out some of his work. You can find Husband Hunters, Corruption, Officer 13, The Millionaire Kid, The Beatniks, and almost all of his TV credits on YouTube. Here's to you, Charles Delaney. Please like and subscribe or follow this account if you want to learn more about the history of silent film stars whose stardom lasted only briefly in the talkies. Up next, join me as I cover the silent to talkie career of Laya Deputy. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.